Behind every threat actor follows a laundry list of tools, bots to achieve their desired outcome. I would start off by getting to know cloud and cloud security. The one thing I would say is don't let the word technical or that's very technical dissuade you. The number one reason for cloud breaches is the human element.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Cybersecurity Stand Up. I'm your host, Bronwyn Hudson, and today I have another Uptycs VIP with me today, Andre Rall, our Director of Cloud Security. Andre, can you tell the people a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are in your career?
Hey, thanks, Bronwyn. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Director of Cloud Security here at Uptycs. Been with Uptycs for about a year and a half now. Prior to Uptycs, I was with AWS for just over 5 years. And my most recent role there, I oversaw their account takeover division. A lot of folks don't know that AWS actually has an account takeover division, but anytime keys are leaked in GitHub or other code repositories, AWS will detect and mitigate any nefarious activities or behavior as a result of that. So yeah, been like I said, been at Uptycs about a year and a half, and a little bit of my role, and I will get into maybe a little bit later, but I oversee the cloud security threat research team here at Uptycs.
Love it. And so I'd love to ask you, before we kind of dive into cloud security itself, can you tell us a little bit about like how you got to AWS? Like what was your background in? What was your education? How'd you get there?
Yeah, it's probably like most InfoSec or just overall security folks, right? It's not a direct path. But for me, I started off in IT, right? Like most folks. I started off in network security, worked at a company called Rapid7 as I came out of grad school. My major was information telecommunication systems.
Okay.
Started at Rapid7 as a security sales engineer. Quickly realized that hard selling in the front lines really just wasn't for me, even though, we're all in sales. From there, I joined a company called Rackspace. Mm-hmm. And at Rackspace, I led a security team that focused on third-party security products. So LoadLogic, IDS, log managers, Imperva, WAFs, RSA, two-factor authentication. So I really got close to, learning about security, how threat actors think, some of the attack vectors that are taken or exhibited through these threat actors. From there at Rackspace, I got promoted into overseeing their AWS cloud offering. So Rackspace pivoted from a cloud company or a managed service, on-prem hosting company to a managed service provider. So managing other companies' clouds. And that got me exposed to AWS. And it really interested me, got me excited, really piqued my curiosity. Long story short, got offered a role at AWS, went and joined AWS, and that's when it just, hit extreme strides forward with understanding AWS, how it works, security of AWS. In my most recent role, like I mentioned, overseeing the account takeover team, that really pushed me into getting to understand how threat actors think, why they do what they do, what are some of the APIs that they use, why they use those, and so forth. And throughout this whole journey, there's been this curiosity, but also just going and learning and understanding and getting certified in AWS. So, it feels like, some people say it's work, but for me, it's been some work, but a lot of it's just been fun, learning how to break and attack and explore on AWS.
It's really encouraging to hear. Like, I love asking folks about how they got into these kind of crazy careers because it's driven by curiosity for a lot of folks, and that is a really inspiring thing to hear, that you've created an amazing career for yourself, but also you've just followed your sort of passions and followed the things that you found interesting to get there, which is the best. I have a question about threat actors. So I don't know how common this sort of train of thought is for a lot of people, but I have to ask it. When I think of a threat actor, I'm no longer thinking of a hacker in a hoodie kind of vibe. That's kind of, history in these days. But when you think about threat actors, are you thinking about people? Are you thinking about human behavior? Are you thinking about groups of people? What is in your mind if I said tell me about threat actors in general?
Yeah, good question. I would say, threat actors are everything in between, right? So there's still these people in hoodies. I think the word hacker is dated, but it's someone, intentionally trying to do something malicious to
Yeah.
an entity, a person, a corporation, a cloud account. What I found, or what we saw at AWS, is most of the folks doing this were, not as sophisticated. When I say sophisticated, I'm talking nation state actors. Nation state actors are also threat actors because they have a very specific outcome that they want to achieve. And, they're just a lot better at achieving those outcomes because they have the resources, they have the money, they have the knowledge, expertise to go and do that. Right. But to answer your question, threat actor ranges from, some little script kiddie out there to nation state actors. If you Google recent cloud breaches, some pretty big names, you'll see that some of these are teenagers, right? Teenagers who just understand the cloud. I always like to say threat actors are cloud security experts, but they have this understanding of the cloud, but they've also got a great understanding of the tooling that's out there, right? So behind every threat actor follows a laundry list of tools, bots, scripts that they're using to achieve their desired outcome.
So I can feel the next question naturally being, how do we catch up? How do we stay ahead? How do people like you help teams protect their infrastructure?
Yeah, so I don't think we ever will catch up, just to be blunt. At best, we're 1-2 steps behind threat actors. The reason being is, their world is all about researching, testing, exploring, experimenting, and they only have to be right once. Whereas for us as defenders, blue team, security vendors, we have to think very holistically across the permissions, the APIs, the attack vectors, and we have to be right every single time. But one way to get ahead of this is whenever I go and talk to C-level folks or present in conferences, I always emphasize thinking like a threat actor mindset. If you can take your blue team, your security team, and have them think how threat actors think, you're already closer to mitigating a potential attack than most. And the reason being is once you change your mindset into this, I'm going to defend, I'm going to make sure that my moat is properly secure, is wide enough. Once you change it from that to, hey, how do I find the crack? How do I find the exploit that I can go in and actually attack? And how do I actually do that? Once you understand how they're doing it, why they're doing it, you quickly realize that your defensive mechanisms or your defensive strategy will have to change for certain behaviors. Getting into the mind of a threat actor isn't easy because not many people can think in that way. A good example of this, when I was hiring for my team, I'm looking for cloud security threat researchers. And I would interview cloud security architects, right? Folks who came in and were able to architect a very secure environment from, application, networking. But as soon as I got into the weeds and said, okay, if you had this permission, how would you escalate privileges? How would you move laterally? What are the APIs you would call? More than half of them couldn't answer me. They couldn't articulate how that works. So even though you have the security-minded person, they're still not able to really think like a threat actor would. So anyway, I know it's a long-winded question or answer, I should say, but at the end of the day, thinking like a threat actor will give you a big advantage of staying at least one step behind threat actors.
For folks who are in school right now, who are looking for a chance to get into cloud security and to be able to think like a threat actor, as you describe, any advice for them on how they can do that?
I would say the best way you're going to learn about cloud and cloud security is getting hands-on experience. So getting an account, spinning resources up, tearing them down, reading documentation, how do they work, how does IAM work, and really getting that practical knowledge behind them. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the attendees reached out to me and said, hey, I'm up and comer, I want to get deeper into cloud security. What can I do? And he followed fast with, oh, by the way, these are all the certs I'm getting. And I said, hey, that's great. Your certs are impressive, but don't just rely on certifications. Yeah. You need that practical experience to be able to develop the skills required to be successful. A cert can give you that knowledge, but unless you actually been hands-on in the weeds, you're going to have a lot of context that's missing. So I would start off by getting to know cloud and cloud security. Once you have a good understanding of that, then shift and look for ways to attack insert CSP, right? So I'm very focused on AWS. Look at ways to attack, exploit, move laterally, escalate privileges, exfiltrate data in AWS. There's many resources on the web. There's a lot of YouTube videos. And then finally, immerse yourself into conferences. So find which are the conferences where these talks are being presented. Yeah. You'll look at YouTube and you'll quickly see the conference name. If possible, attend the conference. Go and bump shoulders with attendees. You'll very quickly realize there are the same folks who attend the same conferences, who talk about the same topics, but they are very deep and immersed in this topic. Yeah. So immerse yourself in this, get the practical skills and get hands-on. And that's a really good way to get into this realm.
Definitely. I'm wondering too, I think a lot of folks, they want to know everything about cloud. They don't really know where to start. And it makes me think of this topic that's been on my mind a lot recently, which is the idea of technical versus non-technical. And obviously for the career path you're in and the being a cloud security architect, a lot of that is very technical material. But can you speak to this distinction between technical and non-technical thinking, or a technical and non-technical career path? And if someone has come up in, I don't know, communications, do they have a shot at being able to get into this industry in a different way as well?
The one thing I would say is don't let the word technical or that's very technical dissuade you, because when you really boil it down, there's these very big technical terms out there. But when you really distill it and say, okay, this is actually what that means, a lot of people say, oh, that's it. Yeah. That's what that means. I understand that. So what I see a lot of non-technical people, when they approach the cloud or they approach a concept, they're already nervous because they're already putting themselves in a position where they say, oh, that's technical. I'm not a technical person. Yeah. So really understand the basic concepts in a very simple way, right? Today with ChatGPT, you can put in anything. You can put in a very complex description and say to ChatGPT, simplify this for me as if I'm a 13-year-old. But getting into this technical thing, it's not really technical. There are certain things that I look at and I say, oh, I don't quite understand it. But I don't go and say to myself, oh, that's so technical, I just can't understand it. Yeah. I just research it. I get in a cloud environment and I practice it. I try to configure something. And at the end of the day, if I understand that, I've now understood the technical piece of that configuration or the architecture or the concept. Yeah. So start off small, don't boil the ocean, take things in strides, simplify them. And really what it is building blocks. Yeah. It's building blocks on top of one another. And once you start getting that going, the momentum, you'll very quickly understand or get the confidence to realize, hey, I can do this. I can actually go and learn this. It's not as complicated as everyone makes it to be.
I fully agree with you, honestly. And I hope that's encouraging for listeners to hear, because I definitely feel like that's how I've approached things as well. Getting in your own way with fear is definitely, it just will stymie you so easily, but it doesn't have to. But I want to go back and ask a question, basically, because I am looking to, continue to gain knowledge as well. When you say something that sounds kind of basic as get into a cloud infrastructure, that's actually kind of out of my realm. Can you tell me what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, the analogy I'll give is, and I use this regularly, routinely in my talks, is, a threat actor, when they steal credentials, imagine a pitch dark house. So the house is your cloud environment. They get in. They don't know where they are. They don't know what room they're in. They don't know how many floors it has. They don't know where the valuables are stored. So imagine the house as your environment or your personal house. If a threat actor gets in, they're getting into your environment. Yeah. They're getting into your personal space, your environment. For companies, it's their cloud environment. So that's really what it means, is getting inside when they shouldn't be inside. Yeah. And then once they're there, like I mentioned, they have to do reconnaissance, which is just, where am I? What do I have access to? Whose permission set does this belong to? Which role, which user? So really that's what it means, is to get inside a cloud environment.
Yeah. On a granular practical level, what are you doing? What are you accessing?
Think about there's two different ways to access, or three, four different ways to access AWS: the console, CLI, which uses the API, and then the SDK, right? So to boil it down, think about a house. You have a front door, a back door, a side door.
Cool.
A console is just like you log into your Bank of America, your Chase, whoever you bank with. You go to the website, you put your username, your password, and you're in. Once you're in, you see what's relevant to you and you can make changes. The same thing happens in the cloud, except the cloud, the threat actor has stolen your credentials. So imagine someone stole your banking details. They're now in and they can do a whole bunch of stuff. The other way is through API. And really what an API is, to put it very simple, you go to a restaurant, you look at a menu, you want the waiter comes, takes your order, goes back to the kitchen, they make it, and he brings it back. Yeah. That is an API, right? You're selecting something from a menu, it's going back, getting it, and bringing it back to you. That is all it is. That's what an API does.
Wow.
So that is another way that actors can get in. Now, there are two different credential sets for console and for accessing the API on AWS.
Gotcha.
So depending on which are stolen, they could go either route and gain access to your environments via those methods.
Extremely informative. Thank you so much for that insight. Some of the work that I have done has been around educating the public about the cumulative effect of data breaches and like how dangerous it is and the kind of the environments that we're all now in, like basically trying to communicate this understanding that your information is probably already out there. It's probably already been stolen. As an expert, can you weigh in on what people perceive as like the compromised credential crisis?
Yeah, just to kind of back up a little, how I operate is assume breach. I assume my PI data, right? Name, date of birth, social security is already on the internet. Yeah. So I have mechanisms in place, frozen all my credits. If you're in the US, you can freeze your credit, frozen all of that because it's already out there and people are seeing it, they're using it, or they're trying to use it, I should say. Going back to your question it was about credential access.
Yeah. And basically I'm tying it into like, how can we educate the public? What useful tactics can we tell them? Can we inform them of using? Like, is it as big of a problem as I think it is?
Absolutely. So phishing still remains one of the top attack vectors threat actors employ.
Right.
Because still to this day, in 2023, we have folks who are using the same password across many different platforms. Yeah. Or there's a variation. My password 123X, my password 234Y. Threat actors know this and they're going after that. Yeah. Again, a threat actor has a very big net that they cast. And that net may only catch a small percentage of, susceptible users. Yeah. But that is more than enough for them.
Gotcha.
Because of this, threat actors are going after the easy targets, the people who don't change their password, who don't use password managers. I highly encourage folks to use password managers. Initially, not many years ago, about 7 years ago, I switched to a password manager. That initial leap was very daunting because now I don't know my banking password. And I'm thinking, well, I've got it saved. Yeah, what if I need it? I don't know it. But once you get in the routine of using a password manager, it is such a weight off of your shoulders. Secondly, what I'd say is two-factor authentication. Do not underestimate how important two-factor authentication is. So whoever you operate with, whether it's banking, a cloud provider, always ensure that some kind of MFA, multi-factor authentication, is present or is enabled.
I feel like it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month at the time of recording this, and I'm sort of acutely aware that I'm not sure it's going well, So like to be able to get practical and honestly kind of easy steps to take that people who aren't in cybersecurity, who are just looking to live a regular life on the internet and in their digital worlds, it's really helpful to be able to have like little key pieces of information to pass that on. In kind of the same vein, is there anything else that you really wish the public knew about cybersecurity? Like, is there a nugget, a fundamental truth you wish you could communicate to everyone? Is there something you wish that everyone knew?
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate the threat actor's ability to be sophisticated. You will see this often, right, where someone will, write a password down or pull up something on a screen in a public setting and think, well, I'm kind of in the peripheral of my eyes, I'm seeing no one's really looking at me, so I should be fine. Don't underestimate that. And I don't want to have this kind of scare tactic in place, but always be paranoid about this. Obviously, you need to live your life and you need to be, happy, but take your privacy, take your credentials very seriously. I always think to myself, okay, what could a threat actor do with this? If they were to get hold of this, how impactful would it be to me? Yeah. Could I do something differently? Should I employ a different method in my process or my day-to-day?
Yeah.
But just be vigilant and know that threat actors are constantly evolving. They're constantly looking for candidates who have a blind spot.
Yeah.
Who don't look at themselves, who don't take it seriously, who use the same password across every different platform. That is the prime target for a threat actor.
And is that often in your experience? Like, I would sort of assume that it's probably an elderly population that are super vulnerable there as well. Are there other populations that we could be sharing this information with that are particularly targeted?
Yeah, it's a bit of everyone, right? It's, the elderly are definitely a target for various reasons. That will have a different type of threat actor who's targeting them.
Gotcha.
Then you focus on threat actors who target corporations.
Yeah.
That's a very different type of threat actor. And they have their tactics, techniques, procedures that they're going to employ across corporations and anyone who works for that corporation. Yeah. Then you can have threat actors who just target cloud security. They know where to look for credentials. They know how to target those credentials. They know how to use those credentials in a very expedited manner so that they don't get detected or they're able to achieve their desired outcome before they actually get detected. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's a one-size-fits-all kind of demographic.
Yeah.
The threat actors themselves are going to specialize in a particular vertical. And what we see in the dark web is you may have a group of threat actors who are very good at stealing credentials, but they don't know how to use them or they don't want to use them. They'll then go to the dark web and sell those credentials to the threat actor groups who know precisely how to use them and precisely how to exploit the environments that those credentials can be used for. But one of the biggest things we see is password spraying. Again, going back to the same password being used, password spraying is still a true and tried, tested exploit. Because breaches happen, threat actors will sell unencrypted passwords to the dark web, and all they do is they run them through their password spraying scripts to see which ones actually take in a particular environment. Maybe it's a cloud environment, maybe it's a banking environment, or it's both. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's a true and tried trusted way that threat actors will exploit or gain access to environments they shouldn't have access to.
And is it for companies who are looking for ways to stop that happening or prevent these attacks? Is it password policies that mainly help prevent that, or what can organizations do?
Organizations are trying, right? So we have password policies today, we have MFA today, but a lot of these breaches, they're bypassing that. Yeah. The number one reason for cloud breaches is the human element. So humans tend to take shortcuts, tend to get frustrated, tend to be a little lazy, and that's why they're targeted so often. So even with credentials that have password policies, we're still seeing breaches. I think what we're going to see more and more of is something that is called zero trust. Even someone who has credentials, you don't trust them, right? They need to make a justified use case for why they need to access something, why they need to, gain access to a resource, to a service, and that will try and mitigate some of the breaches that we've had. But at the end of the day, if the human is still the person or the entity that we're relying on to get something done, we're going to see more and more of these breaches happen because they are the weakest link in all of this.
I think people hear that, like I've read, the same stats in the Verizon DBIR and that kind of stuff. And I definitely have an emotional reaction. It kind of makes me feel bad about being a human. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I am a little lazy sometimes. Like, yeah, no kidding. Like, this is frustrating because when I want to access my bank account, I want it to be really easy, that kind of thing. And I think, how can we I don't think zero trust needs to be like rebranded, but how can we talk about it in a way that like that promotes the idea that being paranoid is actually a good thing and that being cynical is a good thing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because part of this is all of us need to want to learn this, want to understand it. And there's a part of it where people just don't want to learn about security. It's like, hey, I've got my day job and I've got to take care of things. The security thing is for the security team.
Right.
They can go and implement what they need to do. They can do what they want. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's a matter of realizing the outcome, the blast radius. If something were to happen to, your credentials that resulted in, your credentials got stolen, they were used to access your cloud environment, and they spun up $200,000 worth of crypto mining. Well, that may come back to haunt you because, well, what diligence did you have? Where did you deploy those credentials? How did you use them? So I think for humans to really take this seriously, there needs to be more of a, hey, this is what is going to happen. You need to want to understand the repercussions of this. Security is not just for security folks, right? Security is for every single person. On a personal level, I would say, imagine getting your identity stolen. Imagine getting your bank account compromised to where they drain your funds. I think that hits home.
Yeah.
Go and ask any of these folks who've had their identity stolen, their bank accounts drained. I'll bet you now they are taking that a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
Again, I always like to say, what would happen if this were to be breached? What would happen if this were to get compromised? And think through those worst case scenarios. I think that'll help resonate or change the mindset to where folks are saying, okay, I should probably take this a little more seriously.
I think that's very wise. And even though it feels a little bit like fear tactics, it's like, well, yeah, maybe that is something you should be afraid of. That's like a realistic thing. It's not necessarily fear mongering. It's like, no, this is something that you should definitely be afraid of on some level. Okay, so changing gears a tiny bit, I wanted to ask you, because you're the director of cloud security at Uptycs, but you've had a really interesting career in terms of like how you've gotten to where you are. Is community something that you feel is salient within the cybersecurity industry? How do you build community? I mean, I feel like in a directorship, you have, your team, which is kind of a different kind of community, but do you feel a kinship with other cloud security researchers and directors?
It's funny because once you get into this world, you actually realize it's a very small world.
Yeah.
It's the same names, it's the same concepts, same people talking. I think it goes back to just, overall, I think there's a big lack of cloud security, deep cloud security knowledge out there. Just because it's so complex, it's so vast, it's impossible for one person to wrap their arms around every single piece and become a true expert across everything. Yeah. But there is a community. You got to know where to find the community. You got to find the right people, the right conferences. But they are very, very helpful, very willing to take their time and help up and comers. I personally, there's questions that I have based on something I'm researching, based on some nuanced behavior that, as an example, we have a cloud security Slack channel. I may post on there and say, hey, I'm seeing this. Anyone else seen this? Should I expect this? Is this something that is anyone else has experienced? And everyone is very helpful to, lend their ideas, their comments to that. So I would say there is a community. It's growing and growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. But, I think there's still room to go to get more and more folks entwined into cloud and cloud security personally. I feel like there's a skill shortage. I feel like there is a big knowledge gap. Going back to my example about someone could architect a cloud environment, but going into how to think like a threat actor, there's still a big chasm of knowledge there.
Yeah, going back to that, what you were saying about like certs are great, but you kind of need this practical experience too. I mean, for someone who's looking, I agree with you. I think there is a skills shortage, but also I don't see a lot of entry level roles for cloud security. Not that I'm like looking in depth or anything, but for someone who's trying to, get that leg up, get that experience. Do you have any favorite resources that you'd recommend or is YouTube your go-to?
Yeah, it's a combination. I wouldn't say YouTube is my go-to. I use YouTube, but I would also, like I said, I think the biggest gains I've received has been trying to be associated or within this cloud security circle.
Yeah.
And I say it's a circle, but it's an open circle. Anyone can come in and they're willing to help. But just watching and listening and seeing and reading what some of these other folks are talking about, that has opened my eyes to say, wow, I had no idea that works like that, or I had no idea that's even possible in cloud. So again, going back to my earlier comment, immerse yourself into this world of these folks, these experts. Listen to or attend these conferences. Nowadays, a lot of conferences are putting their videos of the conference on YouTube. So that's another way. If you can't attend, watch the videos on YouTube. But I think just learning about it, reading about it, and again, most importantly, trying to perform that in a cloud environment, right? Getting that practical hands-on knowledge of trying to do it. In the beginning, it's going to feel very frustrating. It's going to feel you're going to doubt yourself because you're like, well, I have no idea what the hell's going on here. Why am I doing this? Try and overcome that. Try and push through that. Because once you successfully perform your first change, exploit, configuration as a newcomer, it's very infectious. It's very satisfying because you've achieved something that you've worked so hard to do, and you just keep building on that, and you keep building on it until you find that you just take a step back and you say, wow, I actually know quite a bit. Maybe I'm not an expert, but I actually know quite a bit at this point.
Heck yeah, I totally agree. It's really important to look back at your journey as well as to look forward into it. Well, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I do have one sort of like dismount question because I like to be a little goofy. If you could hire one fictional character to be your head of maybe you're like your CISO that you report to, or maybe like your co-director of cloud security, who would you hire and why?
Probably Charles Xavier from X-Men.
Oh, great call.
Exceptionally powerful telepath, can read and control the minds of others. So, hey, find out who the threat actors are, go control their minds, and have them do something else. Go and paint unicorns, whatever. But he would be my CISO. He would be my go-to.
Love that. Great answer. Wonderful. If you want to be found on the internet, where can people find you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the most widely used platform that I use. But yeah, Andre Rall, just search on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to connect, happy to answer questions. If any folks have comments or questions that I can help with, reach out to me, and happy to be of use.
Thank you so much for your time today, Andre, and we will see you out there next week in cyberspace.